this talk is about is the idea of freedom like another carrot to chase after, I think the title of the talk is. I think it can become like that. Like there can be a time when freedom becomes like another carrot to chase after. And it's a very convenient carrot. Like normally by the time people get into this, they've had a hard time with life, or they've had a good time, but then they finally got to a dead end in their life. Maybe they've exhausted themselves from working too hard, or they've got lots of children, got lots of bills to pay, like really overstretched themselves. Or maybe they're lonely, maybe they never had children, never had family, or maybe their partner left them. So there's been a point where life has become too much. And then the spiritual questions get asked, like, who are you? Or maybe for some people there's years and years of therapy and they don't find that work, so they end up getting into spirituality. But anyway, you end up getting into non-duality, and at first it's a relief that there is something else. Like it's a relief that this world just isn't the way you think it is, and that that's your lot in life. There's like a relief that there is something else to strive for, because maybe you've got to the point where nothing else in life works, like everything else that you have done in the past has disappointed you. So there's a relief that there is something else, something bigger than you, and something more than you already have. And that's very exciting in the first year and a half, 2 years. That's super exciting. You're like, woohoo! At first, when I got into Buddhism, I thought it was so super special, like really different and alternative to be into Buddhism, and like really amazing ideas, and open my mind, and it was really exciting. At first it's like super exciting. When I first got into Buddhism, it was so exciting, this idea of consciousness, that there was this consciousness that was creating everything and doing everything, and that was really like something to strive for, and something bigger than what my parents had taught me, and bigger than what my friends knew about. And I was super excited by it, and it gave me a kick in my step, like I loved reading about it, I was so interested in it. And then it's like everything, it's like a relationship. Then after the first couple of years, then you actually begin to be hit up against yourself. That excitement begins to fade. And then you have to actually face what's going on inside of you, and what's happening inside of you, and your belief systems and your thoughts. And suddenly this idea of enlightenment isn't so easy. And then maybe you begin to blame enlightenment, or you begin to blame freedom, because it seems like there's a lot of limitation in you, or a lot of suffering. It's a bit like a relationship. At first you fall in love the first couple of years, and then after the first couple of years, then you begin to blame the other person for all their failings, for the reasons that you're unhappy. And the big thing that's talked about in non-duality is like this idea of making it one day. Like, so how do you talk about this subject without the person then making a whole new goal to achieve, when it's really an absolute collapsing back into what you are? And in that there's a freedom, but even me telling you there is a freedom in that gives you the idea that there's something better than this right now. It's like I went through so many different stages, and there was this stage where I just gave up on enlightenment. Like I didn't give up on it, as in I still kept reading the books, and and exploring my experience, but I just I no longer cared about arriving. Just feeling a bit more peaceful in the moment was enough. Like this idea of arrival just kind of lost its power. But I can see when people bring this subject up, that the very idea of enlightenment creates, in a way, so much suffering, because you're always waiting for this event to happen. And it's almost like you become victim to it again, like there's this thing called enlightenment, and then it's not fair because you haven't arrived there, and why doesn't it happen to you? And you keep waiting for this thing that's outside of you. You do the same thing that you did in other areas of your life, with money, with relationships. You create this whole victim relationship to it. I'm waiting for your life to start. Like waiting for you to make it, for your life to start. And your life is never going to start one day. What will happen is there'll be an absolute collapsing back into what you currently are now. Which means an absolute acceptance of everything you feel, the pain and the pleasure. So this is how I was taught non-duality, and this to me feels most truthful as to what you can be in words. So we have this dynamic. We are a mammal that is programmed to seek for pleasure and to avoid pain. So we move towards that which is pleasurable. We don't move to burning ourselves or to cutting ourselves or to walking into things. We move towards pleasure. There's this natural movement towards it. Then what happens when we separate is that we begin to believe that pleasure is an arrival place in the future, and it's going to give us everything we want. It's like this big ecstasy in the future. Before you separated, so before you became somebody in time, before you were this person that's a body-mind, you were just being, you just were free, you just were everything. Before that illusion started, everything was perfect as it was, and pleasure and pain would arise, and there was no grasping onto pleasure. There was no idea that pleasure will one day lead you anywhere. You didn't think, like when you were like 2 years old, you weren't thinking in that complicated way. You were just like, ugh. And you cried when it hurt, and you were happy and giggling when it was joyful, and that was the end of it. You weren't sitting there when you were hurt wishing to be happy. You were just sad. You were just unhappy. So when you identify, you suddenly become somebody in time, and you're registering your experience. So you say, this is an unhappy experience, this is a painful experience, and then you wish to have a pleasurable experience. So then you begin to imagine having a pleasurable experience. And then along the way, you begin to believe that pleasure is home. So you begin to forget that home is who you are, is what's happening. It's beyond pleasure and pain. And you begin to believe that pleasure in the future is home. So your deep sense of rest and connectedness and love and intimacy and expansiveness and sense of anything is possible begins to become more tight and contracted and limited the more that you believe you're somebody moving in time, that you're a person with a name, with a way of being that arrived from time, rather than this timelessness of this, of what is, of this moment. You believe you're something that arrived in this room and something that will leave this room. And you're constantly living in this timeline. And then you begin to believe that the pleasure will bring you home. But it's not a conscious thing. It's this dynamic, this seeking, this constant agitation and looking for something better than this. So whatever you do, there's always a sense that there's something more or something else that you should do. And it gets deeply interwoven with survival. So when you become a person, it also increases your fear of death. So it increases the fear of this body going and you not being alive anymore because you're identified with this body. So you begin to fear all the things you identify with leaving. So then you begin to attach to the body and fear losing it. So then your pleasure also gets embedded in this. It is desperate, and it's an energetic thing, this desperate seeking for the future, for finding home, for finding this alive presence, and then trying to avoid death and fear and losing this body. It's constantly in a state of agitation, of feeling uncomfortable, and it's an energetic sense inside the body. It feels like you are small and you're limited, where your natural way of being is to be expansive and unlimited, looking through these bodies, but you become limited, and then you feel that this isn't enough. And then there's this energetic seeking for a future time, and the seeking is all based on your past experiences, so on what you've learned in the past. So say if in your childhood you got great pleasure from receiving your mother's attention, then you will then get great pleasure from seeking and getting women's attention as you get older, and it will become incredibly important to you. And women's attention and women's appreciation and women giving you things, maybe sexually, will be a big seeking point, a big spur, like to move forward, to get. So when you're sitting at home alone watching TV, there might be a strong sense that you're not enough because there's not a woman there. But you're not conscious of that. That is not in your conscious thoughts. It comes an agitation in your body and then a compulsion to get women's attention. So then you might send someone a text or start following somebody on Instagram. That's the latest thing, isn't it, for the young people? Follow them on Instagram. You don't give them a call on the telephone or go out and meet them in the pub. You start following them on Instagram. If you were taught as a child that relationships are a very painful and stressful thing, then at all costs you'll try to avoid it. And that will be an agitation, like being around people might always be agitating. So you'll seek to avoid it. To me, waking up, freedom, liberation, is a relaxing into this moment. It doesn't necessarily mean the end of your habits, and there still might be old seeking patterns that come up where you go to avoid things or you're acting out of your habits, but there is this deep rest energetically in what's happening, and your essence doesn't feel limited. So it's like a shift around, an energetic turnaround. So before, you were living inside this body and you felt like you were this body and you felt like you were a story and you felt like you were someone, to this energetic expansion where you are everything, which is not a thing, like your consciousness, which is everywhere and unlimited. And then there is a looking through this vessel. So the body and the personality structure becomes like this small vessel in the middle of this infinite space, like this expanded, never-ending, anything is possible space. So it's an energetic shift around. It doesn't mean that the personality structure necessarily ends going through difficulties. It could be that suddenly there's an end to all the karma in that body and all the old seeking patterns. But I find that there's still karma of this body, so I still have my tendencies, and sometimes there's still an urge maybe to avoid the tendencies or not avoid them. But it's no longer me anymore, so it's not something that I try to avoid. It just happens, and when it happens, if I have to cry about something or feel upset about something, that it happens, or life teaches me how to get on better with people or whatever it does. But there's a deep relaxation in it. It is as it is. And it seems that the more that happens, the more that there's a deep relaxation in the karmas relax more and more over time. So as there is this expandedness, then the karmas dissipate. And maybe you get to an end of that, but I suspect you don't. I'll tell you why I suspect you don't. Because everything in this world that appears in things is always expanding. So I expect that the human and the karma of the human is never ending, and there's always a possibility to go beyond whatever it arrives at in any way, physically, mentally, emotionally. And then secondly, if you go to like Buddhist teachings, which was my first introduction to non-duality, so if you look at the Buddha would say that karma only goes with the death of the body. And when the person's fully enlightened, so that's nirvana, and then when the body physically dies. Like when the body is alive, it's enlightenment, and there's still karma in the body. And I suspect that's true. That seems to be my experience. Lisa seems to sometimes be a little bit screwed up over some issues, and seems to be evolving as a character. And that feels really beautiful. So to me, it is an event and it isn't an event. Like it is something that happens and it isn't, because in the moment there's nothing that's happened. It's still here no matter what. If you say that somebody's awakened or that there is freedom, like it's all irrelevant. Right here, it's just this. And this is wordless and this is intimate and this is what it is. And then in the story, there seems like there was a before and after for me. For some people, it might just be a gradual dissipating or a gradual like expanding into everything, and it might not be an event. But in my apparent story, there was a before and after. And, maybe that isn't the best teaching, but maybe it is. It's impossible to know, really. How would you know? For some people, it might be that they hear that and then the whole victim story comes up of, I've been doing this for so many years, and it encourages them to carry on seeking. And then for some people, it might be deeply relaxing, like a letting go. It's unknown. We really don't know anything. I know a lot of these teachers always seem to sound like they know, and in other occasions I might really sound like I adamantly know. But in this moment I'm just like, yeah, we don't know anything. We just know what's happening. And it comes out. And we don't know the effect that will have in the future. There's some things that I think are better and more wise than others, but I'm also open to changing my mind on that. Yeah. It's just basically the best thing that if I can communicate to you is this, the freedom of what you are, and then just this deep relaxing into whatever experience it is now. Like getting to that point where you can just feel vulnerable, you can feel pain, you can feel sad, you can feel happy, excited, and there's just a surrender into it. So let's take the feeling of excitement. So the feeling of excitement feels nice, right? We like to feel excited. So if you take excitement, so it's really nice to feel excited. You're totally happy to feel that in the body, just to feel excited. Maybe it comes with lots of stories about how you're going to save the world and you're going to become a non-duality teacher, and then you'll spread the message of love, and then you'll become a politician, and then you'll stop all the cows farting and stop global warming. But that's irrelevant. That's just a story that whirls round and comes and goes. Like what's here is this excitement in everything. It's not even limited to the body. Like you might say, okay, it's in the body, it's in the heart area. But in another way, everything about you is infinite. There's this other part it's not in the body. Like the body is everywhere, the feelings are everywhere, everything is excited right now. Like it's huge, it's like this big infinite excitement, like the whole world is excited, everything. Everyone you see is excited, even if they're like, what's he so happy about? They're still in excitement because as you begin to see there's no separation, you see that there's no separations in feelings. If there's a feeling of sadness, then everything is sad. There's a feeling of excitement, then everything's excited. And it's the same with sadness, but with sadness we automatically think we've done something wrong and we think we have to get away from it and we try our best not to feel it. So there is sadness and instantly people go into the head and then they start blaming someone or something, or it shouldn't have happened, how dare it happen? And then there's this like tight, contracted feeling of sadness and you've done something wrong for feeling sad. Whereas really, the whole world owns sadness. And when the whole world owns sadness or owns your karma, then it's not you that's got to carry it anymore and not you that's got to deal with it. It's like life owns it. Life does it. And when you're excited, you're not thinking like, oh, how long till this excitement goes? How long do I have to have this for? Why am I always excited? I don't want to be excited. Is my life always going to be like this? Whereas when you're sad, all these stories start rejecting the feeling. Whereas really it's total collapse into what you are, which includes feelings and includes thoughts. And in this moment, it's like when you really dive into it, there also is no feelings and there is no thoughts and there is no sensation. There is only everything, which is this. And that's total love. Oh, that's so beautiful. If I ever teach you anything in these talks, it's this absolute surrender into the stillness of what you are, the emptiness of what you are, which is everything. Like total embracing of all of it. Not hanging on to any of it, knowing that none of it's you. It's all coming and going. And then all of it's you in another way. But not you as a limitation, not you as a personality. And that's freedom. And then these talks, like I might not always be the most eloquent speaker or the most poetic speaker or the most logical speaker, but maybe there is a sense of it. There's a sense of connection or sense of intimacy or sense of something else. And that's how I teach, I think. It's more of an energetic thing. I hope it is anyway. That's what I respect the most, rather than like intellectual clarity. Intellectual clarity comes and goes. You have intellectual clarity about something and then an alien ship lands and takes over all the computers, and then your whole perspective is shifted. Like intellectual clarity is relevant dependent on what you compare it to. You never will have certainty in the intellect. It's something that comes and goes and something that humans overly worship and believe in. There's a lot you don't know And you don't know it, but you are afraid of that, so you retell yourself stories to try and make sense of this life. How can it make sense? Even if you put all the consciousness teachings together and you cross-reference them and analyze it for thousands of years, how could life make sense? It's really abstract. Just think about the fact that if we get a microscope and we go in smaller and smaller to the hand, then more things appear. As you get closer, more things appear. And the bigger thing that you originally saw disappears, and you just see the smaller things, the muscles, the blood, the particles, the molecules, the bone. And it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And then the big thing that you originally saw, so you said, that's a human, you get in smaller and smaller, and you're like, no, it's blood. No, it's bone. No, it's muscle. No, it's atoms. No, it's no, what's smaller than an atom? Neuron. I forget these things. I really should look it up and place it by the computer when I speak, so that I don't sound like an absolute moron when I try to talk about science. But it's the way it is. I don't do that, so I just have to sound like I'm a moron. Karma.